Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to our YouTube class on the topic Fair Information Principles. In today's digital era, responsible handling of information is paramount, and we are here today to guide you through the essential fair information principles. We will delve into the core principles surrounding data and information, and gain practical skills to navigate the intricate world of data privacy and fair information. To this end, we are honored to be hosting Mr. S.K. Kashyap, a dedicated lawyer and entrepreneur actively engaged in the dynamic intersection of law, business, and technology. Mr. Kashyap was recognized with the prestigious Daksha Fellowship in 2019, and he pursued the path of dispute resolution. With a multifaceted background, Mr. Kashyap holds an MBA in Leadership and Strategy from Liverpool Business School, enriching his legal prowess with strategic business insights. Currently, he operates independently, seamlessly blending his legal acumen with entrepreneurial flair. As a passionate advocate for data privacy, Mr. Kashyap is committed to sharing his knowledge, and I'm excited to be hosting him today as he shares his expertise with us. Thank you so much for being with here us today, sir, and I look forward to an interesting and enlightening session.
Yeah, thank you, Kashish, for the kind words. Yeah, so let's begin the session, right?
Yes, sir. I'll just
Thank you.
the slides.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So, yeah, as Kashish told you, I am Kashyap and I am basically a lawyer in Kerala. And I work independently, particularly in the area of data privacy laws. So let's start. Today's session is all about fair information principles. Even though this is a broader term, I'll try to give you a brief introduction and different jurisdictions where this applies, major jurisdictions where this applies, and we'll particularly look at EU and GDPR. Okay, so let's understand what do you mean by fair information principles. So many jurisdictions do not actually have the term fair information principles as such. You might find principles, you will definitely find principles that convey the idea of fair information principles, but may not be explicitly stated as so. So to give you an introduction, fair information principles emphasize ethical and responsible data handling, and this is present in various data protection regulations around the world. As I said, many jurisdictions do not use the term fair information principles as such, but they have incorporated similar concepts into their data protection frameworks. So let's understand a few jurisdictions, major jurisdictions with notable data protection regulations that include fair information principles. So yeah, the first one is EU regulations, that is the General Data Protection Regulation. It is commonly known as GDPR, and this is the most important data protection regulation in my opinion. And let's understand what GDPR is. It is a comprehensive data protection regulation based in the European Union. And what are the principles that we are going to discuss in this class? So it is lawfulness, fairness, transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, integrity and confidentiality, which is security, and also accountability. So these are the principles that are mentioned in GDPR. We'll come to more detail in later in the session. Okay, the second jurisdiction is United States. While the US do not have a single federal data protection law like the EU, various states have state specific data protection regulations. Okay, so these state specific data protection regulations obviously have fair information principles incorporated into their statute. For example, might have always heard of CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, or the Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act. So these particular statutes include principles related to transparency, purpose limitation, individual rights, etc. Let's look at the third major jurisdiction, that is Canada, and the statute in Canada is Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act. So, what all fair information principles are included in this legislation? We'll see. So, this Canada legislation includes accountability, consent, limiting collection, limiting use, disclosure, retention, accuracy, safeguards, openness, individual access, etc. We'll discuss what all these terms mean later in the session in detail. Okay. The fourth major jurisdiction is Australia, and the Act is Australian Privacy Act of 1988. So the Australian privacy principles have fair information principles such as transparent management of personal information, purpose limitation, data quality, data security, etc. And so this was just to give you a brief idea about the major jurisdictions and how fair information principles are incorporated into their data protection statutes or regulations. Okay. So we'll be dealing with GDPR in detail. We'll be dealing with what all fair information principles are mentioned in the GDPR. These are the major principles. So we'll look at it in detail, each one of them. The first one is lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. The second one is purpose limitation. The third one is data minimization. The fourth one is accuracy. The fifth one is storage limitation. Then there is integrity and confidentiality, which is security, as I mentioned. And the last one is accountability. So before moving on to what these fair information principles mean, I would like to give you an idea of GDPR. GDPR is General Data Protection Regulation. It is a regulation enacted by the European Union to replace the Data Protection Directive of 1995. So why was GDPR designed? It was designed to address the challenges posed by the digital age, which you all already know, and it is legislated to recognize the importance of protecting personal data in an increasingly interconnected world. So, what is the purpose of GDPR? Its purpose is to protect the rights and privacy of individuals. The primary objective of the GDPR is to empower individuals and provide them with greater control over their personal data. So, what happens with data privacy is uh, we we have a tendency to interchange the concepts such as data protection and data privacy. We might use it interchangeably, but there is a significant difference that I feel between the two terms. So data privacy is more of like giving the data subjects. So if we are a user, so if I am a user of a particular platform or a company and I am a user of their services, data privacy is all about me having control of my personal data. So I can choose what data I can share with the company. I can choose what power should I give them. I can know my rights over my data. I can I can be aware of what the company is doing with my data, etc., etc. So a significant difference between data protection and data privacy is data protection is more of a company perspective. It is the precautions that a company take for to preventing data breaches, to prevent to maintaining the security of their data, etc., etc. Whereas, as I said, the purpose of GDPR here is to empower individuals and provide them with a greater control over their personal data, and it seeks to ensure that individuals are informed about and can consent to the processing of a personal information. So these regulations ensures that individuals are informed about the type of data and the data the companies take, and they can decide whether to consent to that processing or not. I hope this is clear. And next is enforcement. So this is just to give you an idea about GDPR and how to which all individuals this applies, to which jurisdiction this applies, etc. So enforcement applicable to organizations handling personal data of EU residents. GDPR has extraterritorial reach, applying not only to organizations based in the EU, but also to those outside the EU that processes personal data of EU residents. So this is an important point. GDPR deals with the processing of personal data of EU residents. But then you have to understand that if a company is operating outside the EU, and if a company is operating outside the EU, they have a data subject in an EU resident. So they have a market there. The individuals from EU are using the service or product. So in that case, that particular company will be bound by GDPR. Okay, that is an important point to note. And this places significant responsibilities on data controllers and data processors, compelling them to adhere to stringent data protection principles. So here we came across two terms, right? Data controllers as well as data processors. I'll give you I have not added this in the slide, but then I'll give you an idea about what these two terms mean, just so that you will be able to understand if this comes later in the slides as well. So the two important terms are data controller and data processor. So data controller is an important entity. Data processor is another important entity, and you'll see these two terms coming very often in data protection regulations. Okay, so who is a data controller? A data controller is an entity that determines the purposes and means of processing personal information. For example, so in simple terms, data controllers determine why and how personal data is being processed. Okay, why and how personal data is being processed. And who is a data processor? A data processor is an entity that processes the personal data on behalf of the data controller. So I hope these two terms are clear. I'll give you a small example to make you understand, this in depth. So just just to recap on that, data controller is an entity that decides why and how personal data is being collected, and data processors are those entities that process personal data on behalf of or on the instructions of data controllers. Okay, now let's take an example. So to make you understand, let's take an example of an online retail company that collects data of individuals during the purchase. So let's take the case of India only, a hypothetical example, so that you can understand. Let's take a company such as Flipkart and a user. So if I am logging in, I'm making a purchase, they'll collect my details, right? They'll collect my personal details. They'll collect my name, phone number, email address, my address, etc., etc. So in this case, uh, Flipkart can either be the data controller or data processor. So who do you think Flipkart is? I mean, Flipkart is a data controller in this case. And with the same example, I'll tell you who a data processor is. So if you are making a purchase from Flipkart, right, generally they ship it through logistics companies such as eCart or whatever, any logistic company for that matter. Okay. And I'll just log into Flipkart and make a purchase. I'll give my details, I'll pay the money, and my order is being shipped. And this order is being shipped by a logistics company. Flipkart will arrange for all that. Flipkart will transfer my data, my personal data, to this logistic company, right? I am giving my address to Flipkart. Flipkart will process it and give my address to the logistic company. So on behalf of Flipkart, the logistic company processes my address and everything, and delivers the product to me. So in this case, if you can understand it, data controller is Flipkart, and the processor who is processing my data on behalf of Flipkart is the logistic company such as eCart. I hope that's clear. Next, what is the importance of fair information principles? In the landscape of data protection, fair information principles stand as a cornerstone of ethical as well as responsible data management. They play a crucial role in fostering trust, respecting privacy, and ensuring the responsible handling of data. So, fair information principles stand as a cornerstone of ethical and responsible data management. It is about ethics. It is about managing data responsibly by a company, and so if a company manages data responsibly and makes adheres to all these fair information principles, that will ensure and foster a trust between their data subjects or their customers and the company. If the company respects the privacy of their data subjects or customers, there will be a trust, and the customers will obviously acknowledge that the company is handling their data responsibly. And fair information principles, as enshrined in GDPR, serves as a compass for organizations navigating the intricate terrain of personal data. I hope that is also clear to you. Now, let us move on to the first fair information principle. I mean, this is lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. These are three concepts. I'll tell you all what these three mean in detail. The first of the fair information principles under GDPR is lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. So, this is a principle that lays down the foundation for ethical and compliant data processing practices. Okay, so let us understand what lawfulness is. We'll come to fairness and transparency in the next slide. So, what is lawfulness? All processing of personal data must have a legal basis. That is a requirement, and this requires obtaining explicit consent from the data subject, fulfilling a contractual obligation, complying with a legal requirement, protecting vital interests, performing a task carried out in public interest or in the exercise of official authority, or pursuing legitimate interests unless overridden by the interests, rights, and freedoms of data subject. I know that this can be a bit complex to you, but then let us try to break it down. So, all processing of personal data must have a legal basis. Okay. So, in the last example that we said, I am giving my details to a online retail company, and the company ships products whatever I have ordered to me. So, in that case, my personal data is being processed to perform a contractual obligation. So I have a contract with a particular company, right? I have a contract so that I am paying you this much money, you are agreeing to ship this product to me in so and so days, right? That is the contract between me and the company. So the processing of personal data happens for fulfilling such a contract. So that is the fulfilling a contractual obligation part, and complying with the legal requirement. There might be a legal requirement in some cases. Okay, on I'll give you another example as we go along. So there will be protecting vital interests. They will be performing a task carried out in the public interest. So, for example, to tell you, the government collected your personal data when during the time of the pandemic. So that was a time when you cannot say that you cannot collect my personal data. When companies collected your personal data, you cannot say that you cannot collect my personal data. This is because it was carried out in public interest. It was to balance the interest of the public at large during the pandemic. Okay, so pursuing legitimate interests unless overridden by the interests, rights, and freedoms of the data subject. So we'll understand what fairness is. So fairness: data controllers must ensure that the interests and rights of the data subjects are taken into account. Fair processing implies avoiding any unwarranted impact of individuals and treating them fairly in all aspects of data handling. So, in this case, so for example, in the online retail example that I said, I am the data subject. I am the person who is ordering a product in the online marketplace. I am the data subject. So, in that case, data controllers must ensure that the rights and interests of the data subjects are taken into account. I have certain rights under GDPR, right? I have right to access, right to rectification, etc., etc. So we are not dealing with that today, but then just understand that I have certain rights. So the data controllers must ensure that my rights and my interests as a data subject is being taken into account. Fair processing implies avoiding any unwarranted impact on individuals and treating them fairly in all aspects of data handling. So the data controller must may take into consideration my rights and my interests when they are processing or deciding to process my personal data or personal data of the data subject. The third one is transparency. As the term suggests, you will be able to guess what this is, but then transparency involves providing clear and easily understandable information to individuals about how their data will be processed. So while I am making an order, I am making a contract with the online marketplace. I should be clearly informed about what all personal data of mine is being collected. That is one thing, and this should be clearly informed, and this should not be ambiguous in nature. I mean, whatever information, whatever communication is being done to the data subject from a data controller, it should be simple and plain in language. It should not be ambiguous in nature, and I should be able to understand it. That is a requirement. It must be whatever happens with the data processing, it must be transparent between the controller and the data subject. This includes informing them about the process purposes of processing, legal basis for processing, the retention period, and their rights regarding their personal data. So I should be made aware what for what my personal data is used. So if they are collecting my email address, phone number, my name, address, etc., I should be known that why are they collecting this for. You might have seen these pop-ups come from companies websites online saying that your data is being collected for improving customer uh, you know making user interface more more enhanced or customer centric, etc., etc. In those cases, I am being told that my information is being collected to improve customer analytics, etc. In Take that for an example, and there can be many other examples, but then this is the basis of purpose of processing. And then the legal basis for processing, the retention period. About the retention period, say for example, if a company is collecting your personal data, they are collecting it for a particular period of time. They'll let you know about that, or you have the right to know for how long they'll keep your data collected. So they collect and store your data. For example, if I'm enrolling for a course, for example, Losico. Okay, if I'm enrolling for a course with Losico, they will obviously take your personal information such as name, address, everything, and but then they will obviously have a particular retention period to keep your data. They'll not keep your data forever. For 100 years, they won't keep your data. They'll keep your data for a particular period of time. Say it might be 5 years, it might be 8 years, and that will be mentioned in their policy. Okay, that is there, and their rights regarding their personal data. So data subjects must be made aware of their rights regarding their personal data. So if I so to explain to you simply, if I am a data subject and I will have certain rights, if I am finding that my data is inaccurate. So if I have given my date of birth to a company, and later I find that my date of birth is inaccurate. Okay, I have given a wrong date of birth, or they have a wrong date of birth. On your birthday, they'll send you a birthday wish and all, right? So once you might you, when they send you a birthday wish, you understand that they have your wrong date of birth, and you want to change it. You have a right to change it. Okay, you can definitely communicate that to them, and they can make sure that this is accurate, and you can get it changed. So you have certain rights like that. That is rights regarding your personal data. And so we mentioned lawful processing, right? Examples, I want to give you a few examples of lawful processing. The first one is obtaining explicit consent for specific processing activities. What is explicit consent? So, if a data subject, if a data controller wants to collect my data, I should give my explicit consent for specific processing activities, right? That is one thing. Next one is processing data to fulfill contractual obligations with the data subject. As I told you in the previous example, in the data in the online retailer example, right? That was a contractual obligation that the company wants to fulfill. So I have paid the money, the company wants to ship the product to me. That is a contractual fulfillment, and that is why they are processing my personal data. I am the data subject here. Okay, and complying with legal requirements for data processing, protecting vital interests such as in emergency situations. We mentioned about the pandemic situation as such. Carrying out tasks in the public interest or exercising official authority. So government agencies, etc., can take your personal data. They have a, what do you call? They have a exception. Unlike private companies and all, they have a right to exception in many jurisdictions to have a control over your personal data. Pursuing legitimate interest, ensuring a balance with the rights of the data subject. So this one is slightly trickier. So when a company wants to pursue its legitimate interest. So, as I said, if they want to improve the customer experience, they will collect your data. We have all seen that. We have all seen and agreed to pop up showing that we are collecting your data for improving customer experience and all. And in that case, you have to understand what a legitimate interest is, and is that a legitimate interest of the company? Does the company have it as a legitimate interest to collect the personal data and improve the customer experience? And the second part is the trickier part here. They have to balance the legitimate interest with the privacy of the data subject. So they have to balance the legitimate interest, and they have to they have to keep the legitimate interest of their company on one side, and on the other side they'll have to keep the rights of privacy, rights of me, data subject, on the other side, and they'll have to balance it. That is another important thing. Kashish, do you want to say something? All right. Okay. Okay. So, moving on to transparency in data processing activities. So, what do you mean by being transparent in data processing activities, right? Uh, Organizations must be open and honest about how they collect, use, and share personal data. As I mentioned earlier, sorry, as I mentioned earlier, organizations must be open and honest about how they collect, use, and share personal data. If a company is collecting my data, it must be open and honest. I should know what all data of mine is being collected, how they are collecting it, for what they are collecting it, are they sharing my data with some other third party companies, etc., etc. Transparency involves clear communication with data subjects about the processing activities, purposes, and any third parties involved. That also is the same. Okay, providing easily accessible privacy notices, terms of service, or similar documents is essential for meeting transparency requirements. So, as I mentioned just a moment back, privacy notices or whatever documents is being communicated with you, it should be easily understandable, okay, easily accessible as well. If you're going to a website and they have a privacy requirement there, you have to opt out of certain things. It should not be it should not be blurred or anything like that. It should be clearly visible, and you must be absolutely able to understand what that is. So that is one key requirement in many jurisdictions. It must be easily readable or understandable. Okay. Next one is importance of informing individuals about data processing. So as I mentioned in the beginning, informed individuals are empowered individuals. Transparency between the data controller and the data subjects build a trust by ensuring that individuals understand how I will understand how my data is being used by the company. And informed consent is a fundamental aspect of lawful processing. Individuals have the right to know and understand how their data will be processed before giving consent. So, if I'm giving consent for a particular processing to a company, before that I'll need to know how my data is being processed, right? So I before that I'll have to know how the company is using my data, how the company is the company sharing my data with any other third parties, etc., etc. So that is there. I have to be informed before I'm giving my consent. That is the point. Okay. Transparency also facilitates individuals' ability to exercise their rights, such as the right to access, rectification, and erasure. So, these are a few rights that I mentioned in the previous slide. Okay, right to access my information, rectify my information, and right to erase my information. Okay, these are a few rights. I gave you an example of them in the previous slide. The second fair information principle that we are dealing with is purpose limitation. Okay, this is also a fundamental principle of fair information handling under GDPR. This principle underscores the importance of collecting and processing personal data for specific legitimate purposes and refraining from using the data for any purposes that are incompatible with the original intent. So just to make it simple for you, the purpose limitation is all about uh, while a company that is a data controller decides to collect data from their data subject. So they'll decide if a company wants to give a loyalty bonus to a frequent customer. Okay, they'll they'll have to collect a few information. They'll have to collect their names, purchase histories, etc., right? So in that particular case, they'll while they decide to collect the information, even before that they'll know what all information needs to be collected. So that is the original intent. Okay, any data collection other than that will be considered as beyond their intention, right? Let's go to the explanation. Purpose limitation is rooted in the idea that organizations should have a clear and lawful basis for collecting and processing personal data. This ensures that data controllers define specific and legitimate purposes for which data is collected, and these purposes are communicated to the data subjects. So there are two things that you have to keep in mind. The first one is data controllers must define it specifically and the legitimate purposes for which the data is collected. These are the two things that come under purpose limitation. Okay, so collecting data for specific and legitimate purposes. As I said before, two things that you have to keep in mind under purpose limitation. Collecting data should be for specific and legitimate purposes. Okay, organizations must clearly identify and communicate the purpose or purposes for which personal data is being processed. So, um, as I said before, transparency is a key thing. Communication is a key thing. Organizations must be very transparent about the data that is being collected, and in this case, organization must clearly identify and communicate the purpose or purposes for which personal data is being processed. So if I am, as I said, for the loyalty program offered by a company wants to, reward their frequent purchases, for example. And in that case, the company will know that what all data they need and their purpose. Okay. So I hope you understand that if a company is collecting my data for that, I'll be known for what they're collecting. I know that they are collecting my data for a loyalty program and it is ranging from this date to that date. Okay, for these dates, and my data won't be stored beyond such period. Okay, my data won't be collected for beyond a period or stored for beyond a period that is specified. That is the thing. Identified purposes should be specific, explicit, and legitimate, ensuring that individuals are aware of why their data is being collected and processed. Yeah, so as I said, the loyalty program. Let us take this example and let us, discuss this in detail. So imagine a scenario where an online retail company XYZ Mart, okay, launches a new loyalty program to reward its customers for frequent purchases. The primary purpose of this program is to enhance customer engagement, encourage repeat business, and gather insights into customer preference for marketing purposes. So you have to understand that the primary purpose of this program is to enhance customer engagement, repeat business, gather insights into customer preferences for marketing purposes. Okay, so we'll see how purpose limitation applies in this case. So what is the purpose, primary purpose? It is to administer the loyalty program, offer personalized discounts, and improve their overall shopping experience. What is their secondary purpose? And we have to see that they're avoiding unrelated use. For example, they do not use this data to assess credit worthiness or for employment background checks. So this is where purpose limitation principle comes into practice. Okay, the company clearly knows that their primary purpose is to enhance customer engagement, repeat business, gather insights into customer preference, etc. Okay, credit worthiness or for employment background checks and all is not even in the picture. It is not their intention. But if they are using it, then it is not aligned with the purpose limitation principle. They cannot collect data for this purpose. They cannot collect data for credit worthiness. They cannot collect data for employment background checks when the customers are aware of collecting their data for these three things: loyalty, encouraging repeat business, gathering insights into customer preference, etc. I hope that is clear. It is an unrelated use. Creditworthiness, collecting data for creditworthiness or for employment background checks is a secondary purpose, and it is an unrelated use as for the company. Okay. Additional consent for new purposes is required. So if a company did not have an initial intention to collect the data for credit worthiness. Let's take for an example. If they want to do that, they should take additional consent. If it is a new purpose, credit worthiness is a new purpose, and we'll add it to the existing three purposes. Okay, we'll add it to customer engagement, encouraging repeat business, and gather insights into customer preference, and then it will credit worthiness will come. So now there are four purposes, and if there is a new purpose in credit worthiness, so the company controller should take additional consent from the data subject. I hope that is clear now. Okay. Data minimization and retention period. Data minimization is another principle. Okay, it is another principle. I'll just mention it now. It is not it is not under purpose limitation, but then I'll just tell you what it is, just so that it will be clear with this example. So data minimization, our primary purpose in this case is to collect data for customer engagement, repeat business, and gathering insights into customer preference. Okay, so you can understand, you can have an idea of what all information will be required. So let's take for an example, basic example. Okay, your name, email address, phone number, etc. Let's take these three. Okay, these three will be basically required. Your purchase history. Okay, let's take these for an example. It will be required. And if a company collects your blood group for that, if a company collects my blood group saying that this is for rewarding me for loyalty and such things, encouraging repeat business, is it actually required for that particular loyalty program? No, right? So data minimization is all about collecting so and so data that is only necessary. Okay, and minimizing the data collected so that it serves the purpose. And in this case, if the company is collecting my blood group, that cannot be considered as aligning with data minimization principle. It is an unrelated. It cannot be, that particular data is not required for the company for this particular intention, right? So data minimization, just the company has to collect minimum amount of data to serve that purpose. That is this thing. Retention period is all about as I said, in the case of lawseco itself, the company will have a policy. The company should have a policy so that any data, that is any personal data that is collected from the data subjects, they'll collect and store it for a particular period of time. They should clearly mention it to the data subject. So lawseco, while they will enroll you for a course, and they'll have a particular retention period after so and so years, after for example 8 years, 5 years, etc. They will not keep your data. So that is the retention period. They'll retain your data only for as that particular length of time. Okay, let's go on to data minimization. Okay, this principle advocates for the judicious collection of personal data, emphasizing the importance of acquiring only the necessary and relevant information for the intended purposes. As I mentioned earlier, data minimization is all. We'll go to the same example after this. This principle advocates for the judicious collection of personal data, emphasizing the importance of acquiring only the necessary and relevant information for the intended purposes. So we have an intended purpose here. Okay, our intended purpose was to collect this data for the loyalty program, for enhancing customer experience, etc. Okay, intended purpose is that we have to collect only that amount of data that is intended for this purpose. If I'm collecting a blood group of a particular data subject, that cannot be said to be intended to this purpose, right? You do not need a blood group for this particular purpose. So that is data minimization. You should collect only the necessary and relevant information for the intended purpose. Let's look at the rest. collecting only necessary and relevant data. Data minimization underscores the importance of organizations collecting only the minimum amount of personal data necessary for the specified purposes. The principle encourages precision in data collection, ensuring that the information gathered directly aligns with the intended uses. I hope that's clear. If you want to make it clear, just go look at this example. Our same example, XYZ Mart. Okay, data minimization is the last point that we discussed. While discussing, I explained it to you. Okay, I hope that is also clear to you. So, in the case of data minimization, as I mentioned, in the beginning, there must be a balancing. Okay, achieving a balance between fulfilling organizational data needs and respecting privacy is a key aspect of data minimization. So, is this a little tricky? I'll try to make you understand. Okay, so as far as if I am a data controller, okay, I am a data controller. I am a company, and while I have an intention to roll out a like loyalty program, I'll have to take your data. I'll have to take your so and so data. So I'll have to take your name, number, email address, purchase history, etc., etc. Okay, so I'll have to, there are two needs. Okay, I'll have my company business needs. I'll have my needs to roll out this program and all. There are data subjects. You have your privacy rights. So there are privacy rights. There is my business need. Okay, there must be a balance between this. The data controller must have a balance. They should balance these two things. They should, the business need should not always override the privacy rights of data subjects. That is my point. Organizations should conduct thorough assessments to determine the minimum data required to achieve their objectives without compromising individual privacy. So, I hope if you want to look at the second point here, that will make it very clear. Orga- Organizations should not, make should not go to that point where the individual privacy of their data subjects are being compromised. That is the crux of it. Sorry. Now, let's move on to the next principle, that is accuracy. Okay, I mean, as the name suggests, you must be able to identify what this is. Let's get into this. The principle places a strong emphasis on ensuring the precision and correctness of personal data throughout its life cycle. So I think I have given an example for accuracy as well. I'll come to it now as well. So what is this principle? What is the principle of accuracy? Okay, this is the this principle deals with ensuring whether your data is accurate, whether your data is precise and correct throughout its life cycle. Say, if for example, if the life cycle of the data is 10 years, data should be correct throughout the life cycle. It cannot be, if there is any change. Say for example, mm, if a company has your employment details and it is required, it is a valid requirement for something, for for a contractual obligation or something like that. So after 2 years, you have changed companies. You might have changed your employment. So at that particular time, the company should make sure that your data is accurate. They are not holding an inaccurate data of yours. That is a simple example that I can think of right now. Ensuring data accuracy. The accuracy principle necessitates that organizations take proactive measures to ensure the data they collect and process is accurate, reliable, and free from errors. This principle acknowledges that the dynamic nature of personal data and the need for continuous efforts to maintain its accuracy. Okay, so as I mentioned above, my if I am employed in a company and if I'm giving that particular data to another company, say for example a bank, okay, so, say for example a bank, and you can understand them, there can be a relation between my employment history and a bank. Okay, so in that particular case, if I'm changing my employment after a couple of years, according to the principle of data accuracy, I mean, they cannot keep the data keep my data as being employed in the former company forever for 10 years. Okay, they might have to take some steps to ensure that my data with them is up to date. That is all about accuracy. So why is keeping data up to date very important? As we said earlier, it is personal data is very dynamic in nature. So companies must ensure that your data is accurate and up to date. Why is it important? Organizations must implement mechanisms to keep personal data up to date, especially when changes occur in the data subject circumstances. Regularly updating data is essential for maintaining its relevance and reliability, contributing uh, to inform decision making process. There is nothing in it. It's just that organizations must ensure that data is accurate, and they should regularly update it. They should take measures to ensure that this is up to date. That's it. Okay. Procedures for data rectification. Okay, data subjects have the right to rectify inaccurate or incomplete personal data concerning them. Organizations must have clear and accessible procedures to facilitate data rectification requests. As I mentioned earlier, you have all this on your birthday. You'll see a lot of messages coming. No, on your there'll be random private companies sending you happy birthday so and so. Okay, so if so imagine a scenario where if you are receiving the birthday wish on a wrong date, it means that there is a chance that the company is holding an inaccurate birth date of yours. They are holding an inaccurate DOB. Okay, you will want to change it. You will want to make it accurate. You want to inform the company that, hey, you are holding an inaccurate personal data of mine. Kindly change it. So, what is the procedure for data? That is about the data rectification. You want to rectify error. Okay, you want to rectify an error in a personal data that personal data of yours. Okay, in such cases, organizations must have clear and accessible procedures to facilitate data rectification requests. So, if I want to change it, I'll have to easily see how I can do that with that particular company. The company should have a policy or a framework to facilitate that. That is the point. Upon receiving a rectification request, organizations should promptly access the accuracy of the data in question and make necessary corrections. This process is crucial for ensuring the fair and lawful processing of personal information. So, if I'm asking a particular company to change my the date of birth as it is inaccurate, the company must make sure that they'll assess the accuracy of the data in question. They'll maybe ask for my ID to clarify it, and they'll make necessary corrections. Okay, this is crucial for ensuring the fair and lawful processing of personal information. Sorry. The next one is storage limitation. What is storage limitation? As you are aware, you will be able to identify this from the name itself. This principle sets guidelines for the responsible handling of personal data in terms of retention and disposal. You are already clear with what data retention is. We have looked at examples of data retention. So, storage limitation dictates that personal data should not be retained longer than necessary for the purposes for which it was initially collected. Sorry. So, I'll give an example on this same example that we said earlier. Okay. Say for example, I am enrolling for a 2-year course in LOSICO, for a 2-year course diploma course in LOSICO only, and in that case, I'll give my personal data to LOSICO for this contract fulfillment. Okay, and in that case, they might have an option to keep my data for, like, say for example, 5 years. I am just enrolling for a 2-year course, but then they'll keep it for 5 years just because in case I'll have to transfer my course or something like that. They'll play it safe. They'll keep it for 5 years, maybe. Take this for an example. But then they'll have a retention period of 5 years or 8 years max. Okay. After that, they should not store it. The purpose for which my data was being collected is enough. That is served. Okay, I have done the course. I have passed the course. Okay, and 3 years have also passed from that. They do not require my data anymore. Okay, in that case, They do not require my data and they'll have to dispose my data because the initial purpose is served. Okay, excuse me for a minute. Yeah. So this principle recognizes that holding onto data beyond its useful lifespan poses risks to individual privacy and may contravene the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation. So if Losico is holding onto my data for more than what is required, it is a threat to my individual privacy, right? And it will violate the principles of data minimization as well as purpose limitation. I hope that is clear. So, what is it about retaining data for the necessary duration? Organizations must establish clear policies and criteria for determining the appropriate duration for which personal data will be retained. That is also clear to you, right? As I mentioned, Losico will have a particular period of time, 5 years or 8 years. They will have a clear policy for that, I'm sure. Okay, that is one thing. The determination of retention period should align with the purposes for which data was collected and with any legal or regulatory requirements. So, if I'm enrolling for a 2 year course and they're keeping my data for 30 years, that does not align with the purpose, right? They can keep my data for 5 years. That is reasonable. Okay, that is reasonable. But then, can they keep my data for 30 years? I'm not sure. So, that is the second point. Proper data disposal and deletion practices. When personal data is no longer necessary for the intended purposes, organizations are obligated to dispose of or delete the data securely. So after this 5 years or 8 years, whatever, my personal data is no longer required, and they should have a mechanism to delete it, as it is their obligation to delete the data securely. Okay. Proper disposal practices include ensuring that data is irreversibly anonymized or destroyed, preventing unauthorized access or retrieval. So these are few mechanisms. Okay, irreversibly anonymized or destroyed, preventing unauthorized access or retrieval. These companies should do such things to dispose the data. Sorry, let's look at the next fair information principle, that is integrity and confidentiality. This is about security of your data. Okay, this is a bedrock. This principle forms the bedrock of data protection, emphasizing the critical need for organizations to implement robust measures to ensure the security, integrity, and confidentiality of personal data. So these organizations, they have a lot of our data, our personal data. They must ensure that they have implemented robust measures, to ensure security of our data. They do not, they have to tell us the measures they have taken. They have to keep it safe, and they should take or implement appropriate mechanisms to do that, ensuring data security. The security principle underscores the responsibility of organizations to safeguard personal data against unauthorized or unlawful processing, accidental loss, destruction, or damage. So, when they are keeping our data, right, they'll have to foresee all these things. They'll have to foresee unlawful or unauthorized processing, accidental loss, destruction, damage, etc. They should foresee all these things and they should take appropriate measures to keep our data safe. That is the security principle. Security measures should be commensurate with the level of risk associated with the processing activities and the sensitivity of data involved. So, how sensitive is the data is also very, very important, and the level of risk associated. So, if it's a very, very sensitive information that you have, security measures should be proportionate to that only. If they are just having your name, then that is fine, right? They should have, if they are having a name, address, phone number, then the level of risk is bit higher. If they're having more details, then the level of risk is more. So they should have appropriate mechanisms, security mechanisms, depending on the personal data and the you know level of personal data they have. So, what are they? These are a few examples of implementing security measures and safeguards by your company. Encryption, okay, employing encryption technologies to protect the confidentiality and integrity of personal data, especially during transmission and storage. Companies can use this to protect confidentiality and integrity of personal data. Second one is access controls, only ensuring that only authorized personnel in a particular company can access and process the information is all about access control. So this can restrict access to many other people and keep the data secure. Regular audits and monitoring, conducting periodic assessments and monitoring activities to identify and address security vulnerabilities. So, if you conduct periodic audits and all know security audits, you'll be able to have an idea of whether your data is secure, or whether there is a chance that it might be used unauthorizedly, or if there is a chance for data breach, etc., etc. So periodic assessments are very, very important for a company. So let's move on to another principle. This is, I think, the last principle: accountability. Okay, accountability. What is accountability principle? This principle places a heightened emphasis on the responsibility of data controllers, stressing the need for organizations to actively demonstrate their commitment to and compliance with the fair information principles. So, the principle of accountability places a heightened emphasis on responsibility of data controllers. Data controllers are the responsible people, and organizations need to actively demonstrate their commitment to and compliance with fair information principles. So, in simple words, what this means is data controllers will be accountable for whatever happens with your personal data. Okay, so if there is something happening with your personal data adversely, there must be somebody accountable. That is generally data controllers. Okay, and let's move on to accountability of data controllers. Accountability places the onus on data controllers to be responsible stewards of personal data, ensuring that fair information principles are not only adopted but actively adhered to in practice. So uh, data controllers must ensure that fair information principles are not only adopted but then they are put to practice. Only when these information principles are put to practice, then only we can create a robust data protection system, a mechanism where the rights as well as privacy of individuals are respected, and where we can prevent data unauthorized use of data, demonstrating compliance with fair information principles. So, organizations must not only establish policies and procedures aligned with fair information principles, but actively implement and enforce them. So this means that it is easier to create a policy, right? For a company, it is easier to create a policy based on fair information principles. They can say that we won't collect that is data that is unnecessary. We will keep your data for a very short time for whatever the purposes, intended purposes, etc., etc., etc. They can say all these things, right? But what is put to practice is the more important thing. So in this case, organizations must not only establish policies, but then they must make sure that they are actively implemented and enforced. That is important. Demonstrating compliance involves a continuous commitment to upholding data protection standards and fostering a culture of privacy. So compliance is not a one time thing, right? Compliance is an everyday thing. So if your company is if a company is planning to you know be respectful of the data of your its subjects data subjects, and if it wants to have a good data protection practice, it must ensure that they do it continuously. It is not a one time thing. Data compliance, data privacy protection compliance is not a one time thing. They will have to ensure that they are doing it periodically. They are doing their periodic audits. They are they are communicating important communication with the data subjects regularly. Whenever there is a data breach, they are notifying their data subjects about it. There are many things, and they have to do it day in and day out. That is how they can demonstrate a compliance with data protection. So, for example, this is an example record keeping and documentation requirements. Maintaining comprehensive records is an integral part of accountability. Okay, organizations should document their data processing activities, including the purposes, legal basis, and data categories included involved. Okay. So, in accountability, maintaining a comprehensive record. Okay, the record. What is this record about? There can be several different category purposes for which data is collected. There are several legal bases for which data is collected. There might be different categories of data. Okay, they have to keep a record of each and everything. So, and maintaining such a comprehensive record is very integral to accountability. Okay. Now, I think this is the last part of our session. This is all about how can now that we have we have come across each and every fair information principle. We have looked into different jurisdictions. Okay, we have looked into Canada. We have looked into Australia, GDPR, US. We have not looked into it in detail, but then you know which all jurisdictions have these fair information principles, and we have looked into GDPR's fair information principles in basic detail. Okay, so now, while having done that, we'll see how organizations can implement fair information principles. Okay, as I said, compliance is not a one-day thing. You have to do it day in and day out. Okay, so how can organizations implement fair information principles? The first one is they should conduct a data audit. Okay, the first step is to begin by conducting a comprehensive audit of all personal data held by the organization. Identify the types of data collected, the purposes for which it is processed, and the legal basis for processing. So, doing a data audit is important for the organization. So, when they do a comprehensive audit of all the personal data held by the organization, they'll have an idea about the type of data collected, the purposes for which it is processed, legal basis for processing, etc. etc. The second one is developing clear policies and procedures. So after this, they should develop a clear policy and procedure. They'll create and communicate clear and transparent data protection policies and procedures. So, as I said, data protection policies and procedures are very important for companies. They must ensure that employees are aware of their responsibilities and these policies align with the fair information principles. So, to give an example, so if you, I think that is clear, but then if you want an example for that, developing clear policies and procedures. So, if LawSeco decides that they should they should keep retain your data for 8 years, that is the policy. Okay, if they want to if they want you to if they want you to communicate a data rectification request, they should have a policy for that. So for all these things, they should have implemented frameworks and policies, and these policies should align with fair information principles. That is the point. Employee training and awareness. Providing regular training sessions to employees on data protection principles, emphasizing the importance of privacy and their role in upholding these principles, foster a culture of awareness and responsibility. So, the employees should be provided with regular training sessions on data protection principles, and they should be made aware of the importance of privacy and the role of that particular employee in upholding these principles. That is also very important. Privacy by design and default, this is another very important thing that a company data controller should do. Integrating privacy considerations into all aspects of organizational processes and systems. Adopt a privacy by design and default approach, ensuring that data protection is embedded from the outset of any new project or system. So when you ensure a when you adopt and implement a privacy by design and default approach, it is ensured that data protection is, whenever you start a new project or a new system, data protection, you will be thinking about data protection, or data protection is an important part of your process. So that particular mechanism should be in your system, and only then there will be enough mechanisms to make sure that data is protected and your company follows a basic criteria to protect data of your data subjects. Next is data minimization and purpose limitation. That is, you know what it is. We have to implement mechanisms to collect only the necessary data for specific legitimate purposes. Regularly review data collection practices to alignment with these principles. So the company must implement mechanisms so that only the necessary data is collected, and the company should not collect any data that is not required. Okay, any personal data that is not required for them should not be collected from the data subjects, and whatever they are collecting, that should be a legitimate purpose. That is also very important. Next is data security measures. Okay, strengthen data security measures, including encryption, access controls, and regular security audits. Protect personal data against unauthorized processing, loss, or damage of the as per the security principle. This is something we have discussed earlier. Data security measures, that is encryption, access controls, and regular security audits. Uh, access control is about, you must ensure that nobody, not everyone has access to the data, and there must be particular individuals who have access to it, and that will make sure that your data is not compromised in the company. Record keeping and documentation. Establishing a robust record keeping system to document data processing activities, legal basis, and compliance effort. This documentation is crucial for understanding accountability and regulatory compliance. So you have to keep a record of what all data of the data subjects is being collected, what all categories of data, what are the purposes for which these data is being collected. Everything should be recorded and documented. So this is paramount in ensuring that there is regulatory compliance, and this also demonstrate that you are accountable for whatever is happening with respect to data in the company. That is a very very crucial practice that will foster an element of trust with the company and the data subjects. Yeah, so let's these are the things that we discussed today. What are the fair information principles? Lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. Purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, integrity and confidentiality, and accountability. So I think we are done with the session. Mm, yeah, I think we are done with the session. If you want, Kashish, are you there?
Yes, sir.
So I think we have covered it. I mean, is there anything you want me to, you want me to emphasize more on?
No, sir. No, sir. That was very enlightening. If you don't mind, can we open up the floor for questions then?
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. We can do that.
Thank you, sir. So, if anybody has any questions, can you please put them in the comments. YouTube has a comment section, and you can just put your questions there.
Or if anybody wants the slide and all, like I don't mind giving it to you, or you can share it to them if they want.
Oh, so that wouldn't be like necessary because like this video is usually up on YouTube right after this, so easily
Okay.
can just
All
view it
right.
later.
All right.
So if you don't mind, can we wait another minute, say, just to
Yeah,
see
yeah,
if
not an issue. Not an issue. I mean, yeah.
Thank you. So I don't think there are any questions for now. So if you don't mind, can we just end the session?
Yeah, yeah, we can.
Uh, Thank you. So, but just before we do, I would just really like to thank you for taking your time out and contributing to this project. It really means a lot to us here at Law Seeker. Thank you so much.
No, no, thank you for having me here. It was a wonderful opportunity for me as well. So yeah,
Thank you so
I
much.
really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much, sir. So I'll just end the session.